Welcome to Healthy AF. This is your host, Cory here at the Health Performance Institute at Illinois Bone and Joint. And we took a bit of a hiatus, but I am back ready to bring you the latest in health, fitness, and nutrition. I stumbled across an article the other day in the New York Times. It just came out this year. Author Danielle Friedman put together a really interesting newspaper article that caught my attention. It's the 8 fitness myths that drive experts crazy. Now, being in the realm of fitness for really over 15 years and being an athlete my whole life, this caught my attention right away. Because, they talk about the 10,000 hour rule. If you've done 10,000 hours of anything, you're likely close to an expert. And so this piqued my interest, and I thought, what are these fitness myths? Let's go through them one by one. I want to give you my reaction to them, whether I agree or disagree, but let's dive in. So myth number 1, the article states, you should stretch before you work out. I agree, that is a myth. Now, I think we need to bring some clarity to this. What is stretching? Now, the author notes that she's specifically talking about static stretching or stretching in place. And the visual I want to give people in their head is like where you go to pull your quad back, you bend your knee and you stretch behind you. That type of static stretching, the author notes, has actually been shown to cause a decrease temporarily in strength. And so what she advocates for is dynamic stretching. Now, I agree with this. I think we need to nuance this a little bit more. When you're stretching, you have to ask the question, what am I trying to do? And by and large, I think stretching is best for helping improve flexibility, not necessarily getting someone ready to do a physical activity. So the question that we have to ask is, what should I be doing before my physical activity? And really, it's as simple as you want to be able to get your heart rate up. You want to be able to activate the muscles, the tendons, and bring blood flow to the joints that are going to be involved. And typically, that's going to happen best through dynamic stretching. And so I have to agree that this is a myth. You should not stretch before you work out unless it has a very specific purpose to put you in a specific position. Most people are going to be better off engaging in a dynamic warm-up, meaning they're moving their body through space. Maybe that's walking high knees or lunging or some light squats or even some light push-ups or getting your core activated. Those things are going to increase your heart rate, bring blood flow to the body, and ultimately set you up for a better warm-up that will help reduce injury and improve performance. Myth number 2, you need to lift heavy weights to build muscle. I also agree with this. This is a myth. Now, she goes on to say in this article that 30 reps is just as effective at building muscle as lifting weights that feel heavier for 5 to 12 reps. And again, that is true, but I think there's something we need to look at a little further here. What happens when people use really light weights is they tend to choose a weight that really doesn't provide enough stimulus. You need at a minimum 30 to 40% of your 1 rep maximum. So if you were to take a weight and do it one time, you need to do a weight at least 30 to 40% of that in order to stimulate muscle growth. Sometimes you'll see people grab a 5-pound dumbbell and they will just rep out curls and they'll get to 30 reps, but they haven't actually created enough tension or enough stimulus for muscle growth. And so the real key here to me is not necessarily reps. It's how much time do you have under tension and how much effort are you putting forth? And effort is a really big deal. Athletes are the best at this. They understand what it's like to push their body to its limit. But most people really don't understand what it's like to give an 8 out of 10 effort or 9 out of 10 effort. And so I loop all this back to the beginning to say, yes, 30 reps can be as effective if by that 30th rep, you are really working. So the key here is not necessarily rep range or weight, but making sure that you have enough stimulus. Myth number 3, running destroys your knees. Yes, this is a myth. what I really found interesting and valuable in this article, and I'll read it, quote, "In fact, not moving increases your risk of developing osteoarthritis along with age, weight, and genetics." I love that because I think sometimes people think, well, if I move or if I do this exercise, that's going to hurt my knees. Movement in and of itself does not hurt your body. There are no bad movements. There are only unprepared bodies. And that is a really important concept that we coach people on here is there's no such thing as a good or bad exercise. You might not be ready for that exercise, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad exercise. Now, I do find it interesting that people think, well, instead of weightlifting, I'm going to go for a light jog, not realizing that jogging is 4 times the amount of impact than walking. And it's a greater amount of impact on your joints than a lot of weightlifting exercises. So while running is not bad for your knees, running is more of an advanced exercise that I do caution people on. Say, hey, we need to make sure you have sort of your base level strength, mobility, flexibility needs met before you just go all out running and pounding on your joints. Myth number 4, walking is enough to keep you fit as you age. I agree with this, and I think this is a big myth that people have bought into where they think, hey, as long as I'm out walking and moving, that's good enough. But research actually suggests otherwise. You have to do more than walking. And trust me, I love walking. I advocate for walking. And what I would say to most people is if you're not doing any exercise or fitness, just commit to walking 10 to 15 minutes a day. Just that. Don't even try to overdo it because exercise and fitness is so much about your habits. It's so much more about you getting momentum than it is the makeup of all the different exercises you're doing. Again, this comes down to priorities. And what you need to do if you're not exercising is you need to first prioritize moving. And the easiest form of that is just get out and walk. Especially, at least here in Chicago, it's getting nicer. Get outside, get some sunshine, get walking. But with that said, strength training is one of the most important things you can be doing. Previous generations did not have the same level of sedentary lifestyle as we do. So they were more active, they were reaching, they were lifting, they were doing manual labor. We are mostly sedentary in a lot of our jobs today. And that requires not just walking, but it requires actually challenging our muscles and building strength so that we can improve our longevity and long-term health. Myth number 5, modifications are for beginners. This is such a huge myth. I love this one. I saw this and I'm like, yes, because what I have found is the more I exercise, the more I learn about my body, the more I help other people learn about their bodies, it's almost always back to the basics. It's almost always back to what do we need to do to make this a little easier so you can actually focus on what muscles are working, where your form needs to tune up. And I think the only thing I would say to this to add a little bit more context is make sure that you're actively progressing and pushing yourself, right? Modifications are great for even a high level exercise. You just want to make sure that you're not coasting. You want to make sure that you are pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, especially if you're trying to build muscle or if you're trying to build your cardiovascular fitness, or honestly, even if you're trying to build mobility and flexibility. It's going to take work, but that doesn't mean that we should shy away from modifications or that modifications should just be limited to beginners. Myth number 6, runners and cyclists don't need to strength train their lower body. I agree. This is a myth that I would love to see fall by the wayside. I have worked with countless runners, cyclists, Ironman athletes, and I can tell you building strength in their lower body via resistance training can do more for helping them improve their performance than simply just running or cycling alone. Not only that, but strength training allows runners and cyclists to strengthen their lower body in different planes of motion. So if you think about how your legs move when you're on a bike or when you're out for a jog, it's a very repetitive forward and back. What we like to do when we work with what we call endurance athletes is we like to get them moving side to side, strengthening their glutes, working their posterior chain, focusing on muscles that might not get as much work, i.e. the quads get a ton of work for cyclists and runners. And we want to make sure, hey, we are giving ample attention to hamstrings and glutes and being able to help develop a well-rounded strength program for runners and cyclists. So yeah, this one's definitely a myth. And if you're a runner or cyclist out there, commit to a strength training program at least 2 days a week. It doesn't have to be a lot. Even 20 to 30 minutes can go a long way to improving your performance and reducing your injury risk. Myth number 7, you need 10,000 steps a day to be healthy. I thought this one was interesting, and the author does go back and talks about some of the different myths that trace back to the 1960s when the 10,000 step meter gained popularity. She goes on to say that the health benefits of walking appear to plateau around 7,500 steps, and even as little as 4,000 steps per day can reduce the risk of dying from any cause. This one I'm actually going to have to disagree with a little bit. And the reason is there has also been other research, and I know people throw this around all the time. Well, this research says this and this research says that. But there has been other research that has shown more steps is actually more beneficial for people's overall health and longevity. And more steps does lower the risk of all mortality. Now, where I agree with the author is that the benefits of walking do start to plateau at some point. But I really think 4,000 steps, if you're a beginner and you're not doing anything, that's fine. That's, like I said, that's a good starting point. But to be honest, if you're not having any pain and you have the time, I would get as many steps as possible. And I think that there's research to support that not only can support your overall fitness, but it can really heavily impact your health as well. Myth number 8, final myth, taking an ice bath after a tough workout improves recovery. And the author specifically interviews a few medical professionals that talk about how not all inflammation is bad inflammation. And that is the piece of this myth that I actually really agree with. Like, yes, this is a myth that taking an ice bath directly improves recovery. I think the question we should be asking is, how does it improve recovery? Like, is it improving recovery the way we think it is? And this is probably a longer topic for another day, but does icing really help improve recovery? I'm not convinced that icing in any form helps improve recovery in the traditional way we think about it. Like, okay, I sprained my ankle or I tweaked a muscle and I'm going to ice it and that's going to make it better. Do I think that might help mitigate the pain or reduce the pain? Yes, absolutely. I mean, you numb an area, it's probably going to feel a little bit better. I think we need to look closer at what is like a cold plunge or ice bath doing for you? What type of hormonal release is that creating? And that maybe in turn is impacting recovery, but is it directly related to the ice bath? I don't know. I think the jury's out on that one a little bit, but I do like how the author calls this into question. So looking back over all the myths, I mean, really, I pretty much agree that all of these are myths, and I would like to see our overall perspective on these things start to change, maybe with the exception of number 7, where I said we nuance the step count a little bit. But overall, I really found a lot of value out of this article and found it to be highly informative. So if you have a subscription to the New York Times, no, I don't get paid for this, but check them out. Check out this article. Again, it's called The 8 Fitness Myths That Drive Experts Crazy. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope to hear from you next time. If you want to learn more about what we do and how we can help you move better, live better, perform better, visit us at www.hpi-ibji.com. We'll see you soon. Until next time, stay healthy AF.